can minimize that, right?
Excellent.
Welcome to Slate School and our panel discussion entitled Arts Are Integral and Not Extra. Slate School is committed to excellence in education. We are delighted to present the Education Idea Lab, which is a new virtual series that is free and open to the public. This thought-leading event convenes leaders, change makers, and participants from all sectors of education and innovation. Thank you for joining us. We are absolutely thrilled to have you all with us here. My name is Julie Mountcastle, and I'm head of school at Slate School. I'll briefly introduce you to Slate School, review the webinar logistics, and we'll then hear from our expert panelists. Slate School is an independent 501c3 nonprofit elementary school where education is focused on cultivating creativity, fostering ingenuity, and inspiring a deep passion for lifelong learning. At Slate School, we have formed a community that is constantly striving to improve practice, to create meaningful educational experiences for learners of all ages, and to change the landscape in education. Slate School convenes experts for important, authentic conversations about education, and these online dialogues, like today's, are free and open to the public. So we are so delighted to have all of you with us today. I believe that we have learners again joining us from 6 continents. Now I'll describe the basic logistics of this webinar. We have amazing panelists, and they have a wealth of expertise to share with you during this next hour. Each of our panelists today will give about a 2-minute introduction about themselves, their current role, and their key guidance and advice about our topic, arts are integral and not extra. We'll then proceed with the panel discussion. And we invite you to submit additional questions as comments on Facebook, and we will select some of those questions to ask the panelists today too. So we'll proceed with having our panelists introduce themselves in alphabetical order. I'm delighted to introduce you to our first panelist, Maria Giarrizzo-Bartz. Maria.
Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today talking about a topic that's most dear to my heart. I am the founding artistic director of Atlas Middle School, which is a theater-based middle school here in New Haven, Connecticut. I studied arts and education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and pursued my BFA in acting as an undergraduate at the University of Montana. So my life has been dedicated to helping young people find themselves and one another through the arts. And I'm really excited to be here talking with you today.
Wonderful. Welcome. And our next panelist is Chris Moffett. Chris, welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to just try to lay out a few touch points to hopefully help you understand where I'm coming from. I am currently visiting assistant professor in art education at the University of North Texas, where I work with undergrad students who are looking to become art teachers. But we also have a PhD program where we're sort of thinking about the broader picture of art education today. But my background initially was actually in philosophy of education, which I studied at Teachers College. And so I sort of am very interested in the integration of art and other disciplines. And then the other piece of the puzzle, I guess, is that I also have a background in movement education, doing something called the Feldenkrais method, in which I've had a private practice, but also I'm really interested in integrating movement into classroom practices as well. And then the last piece of the puzzle, I guess, would be my engagement in art as part of an artist collective, where we do sort of work integrating movement and more traditional artistic practices for museums, schools, that sort of thing. So
fantastic. Great. And now Karin Patriquin. Hi, Karin.
Hi, and thank you so much for inviting me on as part of this panel. It's very exciting. I'm an architect, founder of Patriquin Architects. We're a small architecture practice in New Haven. My background was first in music, then environmental studies, then architecture. So very much believe that arts are really the foundation, or can be a very, very strong foundation for whatever you end up doing in life. Father was a composer, or is a composer. Mother was an amateur musician and medical doctor. So that is my background. Thank you.
Very, very good. Thank you so much. And now Jeff Rhone. Hi, Jeff.
Hi. Well, thanks for having me on this panel. This is really fun. Yeah, I've been a music educator my entire career. I started out as a band director back in my previous life, what it feels like long ago. And over the years, I've become known as a folk song specialist, I guess you'd say. I did a lot of independent research at the in Washington, D.C. Library of Congress. And then I got into it mainly because I was trained in the Kodai methodology, which is essentially a Hungarian methodology for using folk song and classical music to teach music literacy. And I just find that folk song and music in general align with my overall educational philosophy, non-competitive and all-inclusive, I suppose would be a succinct way of putting it. And I teach courses in folk song research at the Hartt School in University of Hartford and at Holy Names College in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And I'm supposedly starting a PhD, but you know how these things can take time.
Great, great. And now Lisa Russell. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Julie. It's nice to see you again. I think actually the last time I saw you, I was struggling with a broken ankle.
Oh, it's true. But you gave a great talk despite that.
It was, I made it. That's all I can say. I made it there. But, yeah, so my name is Lisa. I work as a filmmaker and a curator mostly in the UN NGO space. And how I got there, which I think I'm going to talk about a little bit later, is an unusual path. I didn't go to film school. I didn't go to art school, didn't think about becoming a filmmaker. I actually got my master's in public health and started my career as a humanitarian aid worker in the Kosovo and Albania conflict in 1999. And through a lot of different weird, but now completely make sense experiences, I ended up I work as a one-person crew for the UN and for UN agencies. So I get to travel around the world and tell really incredible stories. And then I also work with a network of global artists where I get to curate performances at high-level events at the UN. I teach workshops, I speak. I think I would best describe my career and my work as sort of the intersection of arts, social justice, and global development. So.
Wow, great. And now I'd like to introduce you to Aysha Upchurch. How are you, Aysha?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. Again, my name is Aysha Upchurch, and I do consider myself the dancing diplomat. I say that I create, facilitate, and design for radical change. And a lot of that is about using the body, having a new narrative on our bodies, on our moving bodies, and on dance that is more liberatory and decolonized so that folks can understand that our bodies are meant to move, and that can be a metaphor, but that's an actual practice. As well as my focus on movement, I have a huge focus on hip hop education. As anyone in the education field should know, many of our students, well, all of our students and many of our educators have not known this world without hip hop. And it is a very powerful culture. It is a powerful lens, it is a powerful language. And if we do care about transformative education and the whole child, then we should open up our practice to have room for that language, room for that understanding. So I have a lot of resonance with some of the other panelists have said about my path. It has been completely circular, maybe more of a kind of ball, but where it has landed me right now, I am on faculty at Harvard University as a lecturer on education at the Graduate School of Education, as well as a lecturer on dance at the School of Arts and Sciences in their theater, dance, media concentration. My worlds focus on bringing together an understanding of hip hop beyond the commercial discourse and aesthetic for us to understand how hip hop dance, music, and culture are so powerful and needed to be in curriculum. as well as how we can just help folks have literally dynamic classrooms that are not static. So I'm really excited to be part of this panel because I don't feel like any of that is additive. I think it is very central to anything that we hope to do that is transformative and powerful and joyful. Joyful and fun, because that is important in education.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I was mentioning to the panelists a little bit earlier that this particular panel is a particular favorite of mine because of my background as well. I was a performer, and I was a performer, and before I was a performer, I think I was an artist, and I hope I was an artist when I was a performer. But all of that preceded my teaching career. But I can say with absolute certainty that the most powerful lessons and the most important things and the things that I hold close to my heart are things that I learned either through the arts or from children. And I think knowing that has defined my purpose as an educator for as long as I've been one. So I'm so thrilled to have you all here to talk about this today. So let's jump right in. So, Lisa, I'm interested for everyone. I've heard some of your journey, and I think everybody heard a little bit there. It's like the teaser. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your journey and how it's led you to kind of embed the arts in a field that wasn't, well, where that's not commonplace, where that's not how it always goes.
Yeah, it's been, thank you for the question. It's been an unusual experience, but it's funny. And I think maybe a lot of the panelists can agree with me. It sort of didn't make sense at the time, but like now that I'm here, all of it was necessary for me to do what I'm doing right now. So I like to joke that I say I'm multilingual because I speak both the UN language and I speak artist language. And understanding those languages and being able to jump between the two is a skill set that I think we need more people to be able to gain. Like I said, I never thought I was going to become a filmmaker. When I was working in Kosovo and Albania, I had this really interesting experience where Kitty Dukakis, actually, she's from Massachusetts area, was on a board of a relief agency, and I had been asked to escort her to Albania so she could do a site visit in the refugee camps. And when we were there, we were invited to this high-level meeting at the US Embassy where women from Kosovo who were running programs in the refugee camps were invited to come sort of share the great work that they were doing. And they were doing really incredible work for women and children in this, difficult situation. But there were these two women who were sitting in the room and they looked really unhappy and uncomfortable being there. And it was shocking to me because, again, this was supposed to be like a, celebratory event. But when we went through the room and we got to the women, they said, we're really unhappy with the journalists who are coming into the refugee camps because they were determined to tell a story about rape being used as a tool of war, which was a very important story for the Balkans and what was going on at that time. But they said the journalists are coming in saying they only have 3 days to tell the story. We need to speak to women who've been assaulted and raped. Can you raise your hand if you've been raped? And that bothered everybody. But it was after the thing that they said afterward that I think really put the idea of the power of storytelling in my head. And that was that they said, what we fear more is that at the end of this war, we will no longer be remembered as Kosovar women, but as Kosovar women who've been raped. And that was such an important statement to make to people who work in the global health and development world, because this was also pre 9/11. So all the news that we were getting in the States, for example, was sort of like world news in 60 seconds. And they were all very like one-dimensional storylines. So we didn't know anything about Ethiopians, for example, besides the fact that they were famine victims. Or more recently, West Africans are Ebola victims, or Chinese are, COVID-19 distributors or whatnot. There was this culture of telling very one-dimensional storylines that were very unethical and really stripped the dignity of the people that we were, quote unquote, trying to help. So that just, whatever it did to me, it just put me on a completely different path. And I joke that I didn't go to film school, but I basically put myself through film school because like spent 3 years learning the craft. And this was like before there were SD cards and DSLR cameras, and even before there was YouTube. Like I was going through books, like troubleshooting, like figuring out how to cut on Avid, and learning from all these, like, resources. So it took me a long time to become a filmmaker, but I work as a director, producer, I write, I direct, I shoot, and I edit short advocacy films. So I've had a great career where I get to travel around the world telling really important stories. So I get this beautiful combination of sort of having the creative background that I grew up with and I was inclined towards. I was a dancer, I painted, I drew, played piano, but also this idea of like I could, make a difference in the world and then use my public health kind of expertise. So, I mean, I could talk about this all day. The topic is also dear to my heart, but I think I will stop with that there, and I can pick up on the next question. But that's
I love hearing about you as translator, basically.
Yes, it's a real skill set, and I use it often because in any industry, right? People size you up real quick on how you speak. So if you go to the UN and you don't know acronyms, you don't know kind of whatever, they will gauge very quickly whether or not you're legitimate in the space. Same thing, I can go to a film festival, and if you're not talking about all the tech terms that we use for our camera equipment and editing or whatnot, you can just size people up very quickly. So these two worlds are so very different. One's policy and program, what's arts and creative, and figuring out how these two worlds and cultures, because they're also different cultures, they work differently. They're, there's just power dynamics are completely out of sync, is a challenge. But I also think because it's a challenge, it's a great place for an opportunity. But there's a lot of things that come with it. It's exciting, it's fun. It's now very trendy and hip to think about arts at the UN, but there's also a lot of ethical considerations that aren't being addressed because artists are not leading that movement. So yeah, let me stop there. But yes, it's fun, it's exciting, but it's challenging.
But it's interesting because the bridge there for you is the art, is the storytelling, right? It's sort of
poetry and dance and all the other art forms. Beatboxing, we did an eco beatboxing battle last week.
Right.
So,
yes. So it's this bridge, and I think that's a connection that I think every single person on this panel has, because I think that we've all known art as the arts as a way for us to understand for ourselves and to see other people understand the world in ways that have helped to bridge difference between socioeconomic groups, between just sheer distance. And I think it's always helped us, and I think it's helped us to process these things too. And I'm interested, you mentioned, and I actually know that Karin has artistic pursuits beyond what she does as an architect. Obviously, architecture is an artistic pursuit. But I wonder how doing other things, how your continued passion for music, beautiful flautist, how these things have allowed you to do the work that you do and helped you to connect with people around that.
Yeah, well, it's actually been a lot of fun in the last few days to think about that and being able to talk to really mostly my daughter about this. She's a ballet dancer herself. So I think, bringing it back to the very elements of music and sort of the verbs that you use with music, it's listening, it's playing, it's making, and that is just so universal. It can bring you anywhere in life. When I think about learning an instrument, it's about notation and technique. So it's intellectual, it's physical, it's coordination of mind and fingers or parts of your body, breathing, posture, all this. Then there's the aspect of collaboration, listening, especially when you're first starting or anytime you're making music together. It is collaboration. It's listening to your peers, learning from them. There's ensemble work that is just such an amazing experience. There's chamber work, there's solo work, there's solo within an ensemble. So some of these concepts really come together when you think about team building, team working. And for us, teams are, within our office, it's with our contractors, with engineers. But again, it's just such a universal concept. Then there's the performance itself, which is always something, it's a culmination, but it's also something that's spur of the moment. It's slightly improvisational no matter what, no matter how much you practiced. So there's all those aspects of it that I've been thinking about recently. But I also think about what it is now that what are the traits, or what are the aspects of music, maybe in the listening mode that I do differently or have influenced my journey. And a lot of it is the composition itself. It's the textures that you can hear. It's the structure of the music. And it just, some of that is so universal that it's a wonderful thing to be thinking about that sort of in an education concept. But I think one of the things that I've learned that I've developed more recently is improvisation with my father, who's as I mentioned, the composer, because that is sort of letting go of the technique. It's it's always there, but it's really just of the moment, and it's just that is a beautiful thing. There's other things I thought about too, in the fact that music is such a temporal. It's melody. It's melody. It's time based, and how to bring elements of time, elements of narrative, elements of arching work into architecture, which is much more of a physical and a static art. How do you create something that is a journey? Is it from A to B? Is it because you're going from place to place, or is it that you're opening up an experience then to close it? There's so many parts of it that I've been thinking about, but a lot of it is this the collaborative aspect of it, and then creating something that can be so much to different people. So let's say we're looking at one space. Is it a solo space? Does it feel like a solo space? Can it also work for a small ensemble? Can it work for a large ensemble? And I'm using it in the musical terms, but yeah, I think I'll stop there.
It's interesting, like when you think about the arts, and now we've heard just two perspectives, and so different, both of them. And I think maybe it's hard sometimes to convey the variety of experience and the depth of importance, and the rigor of working in the arts and understanding the world through the arts. I think it's sometimes difficult to communicate that with families. And I think the world has gotten very nervous, and families can be anxious about the rigor of their child's school situation. And I'm just wondering how we help families understand that the arts really improve immediately achievement, but more importantly, sort of answer that question, will my child be happy when they're 30? Will they have a life partner that they care about? Will they have a group of friends? There's no exact test for that, but the arts, I think, is a bridge to that families need to understand better. So I was hoping, Maria, you could talk a little bit about how you share that and really bring the stakeholders on board.
Sure. So that's been my unique privilege and challenge to convince families over the course of the past, 4 or 5 years now that I've been trying to get a school up and running that at its central tenet is exactly what we're talking about today, that the arts are integral and not extra. Our entire model centers around students working together to run a theater season. And so all of our academic work actually connects in a sort of reverse arts integration model. Instead of bringing the arts into a traditional academic classroom, instead that's the core. So in conversations with family, it's really my number one job to sort of put them at ease about why something that is so different and that really unapologetically places arts at the center can still prepare their young person for the life in front of them. And I think you used the word, Julie, that I laugh about with my colleagues all the time. I call it the rigor trigger, because my whole body like tenses and I'm like ready for the fight when it comes up. And I feel like the first thing I do is take a deep breath, right? Get back into the body. But when parents ask, like, what about academic rigor? What about math and science? I first want to come back to, what do you mean by that? Like, what's the definition in your mind, so that I can use, like Lisa said, the sort of translation mode between what I know to be true about how absolutely rigorous arts learning in and of itself is, but then also try to understand what they mean by it. And often what I hear from families is rigor meaning my young person engaging in work at a high level or at a professional level, or being able to do really difficult challenges and be flexible enough to do this kind of challenge here, but then in another setting, like in high school, in an AP classroom, be able to tackle a problem that they've not seen before. So I think by understanding first where the anxiety comes from and what the definition for individual families is, because it varies, then I can use my sort of arts translation to say that. And I think another huge piece is just letting student work speak for itself. And I have found that to be one of the most powerful ways in all settings, but especially because arts in all of their different forms are a way of storytelling, really centering student stories. And so being able to show, for example, or invite families into students working on a production or engaging in a talk back after a performance that really like peels back the process and the curtain and lets kids and their beautiful work speak for itself is and will always be the best way to convince people who aren't sure yet that when kids are put in a space where they have voice and creativity and they're able to do this work, that those fears go away. I've had just so many conversations with families who say, I didn't know, I wasn't sure, I was trusting you based on X, Y, and Z, but once I saw my students stand on stage and speak so passionately and beautifully about the work they just did, or even the moment where they passed the mic literally to a team member and supported them, like those other fears kind of fall away, and there's a trust in the process.
Beautiful. So far, I think we've been talking to sort of families and sort of trying to help people understand the value of this. But I wonder, Chris, if you could talk a little bit to the educators that might be with us today about what are some effective ways to integrate art into the classroom, and especially for people who want to do that, but then take a look at the enormity of resources and then don't really know, gee, where should I start? And am I going to say something that's not accurate? I think there's an idea that there are a lot more right and wrong answers in the world of art than there are, but I would love to hear how we might empower those teachers to use art in their classroom. I think you might be muted. Perfect. Not yet.
Yeah. Now?
Oh, there you go. All right.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got construction going on, so I wanted to
No,
save you all.
That's fine.
So first, I just wanted to second Maria's point about reverse integration. I think this is a really strong way of thinking about it. And I think, part of that is giving ourselves permission as teachers to step back from this idea of arts integration as this idea of like a kind of supplement where art is it is still treated as a kind of extra. It's like, okay, let's use art now to teach history or to teach math or something like that. And, obviously art can do those things. It's potent that way, but I think this is not the strongest way to approach it. And I think like as teachers, if we can think about art as being integral in the sense of being a primary engagement with our sensory world, through which many other things might pass, but is itself a right and an experience in and of itself, right, then it allows us to change the frame about how we're thinking about the educational experience. And then it's not a question of, well, am I competent enough in, or am I trained enough, or do I know the lingo, or all these things, but can I find for myself a direct access to these sensory experiences? Can I allow the space for that for my own students, right? So I would say, first of all, thinking of art not as an aid to other things, right? Again, although it can do that, but secondly, that we're not, that we don't have to think of it even as a kind of interdisciplinary process. I like to use the word non-disciplinary, like it's just has no discipline, right? Like life has all things and doesn't fit into any kind of neat categories. And so when we treat it that way, then the question isn't how do we bring the discipline of art into other disciplines, but how do we sort of pull back the structures and allow the experience to work on us directly, and how can we think about that as a creative act in its own right? And I think that becomes a much more powerful conversation about what's possible in the moment. It's not about passing on specific disciplinary knowledge, but about reopening the questions that are at the core of all of them. In terms of resources, I think that also kind of flips it on its head, right? And so, and I think as educators who maybe aren't comfortable identifying as artists or thinking about how they might incorporate art into their own classroom, I think like saying, okay, here's a set of art resources, instead of being helpful, can provoke a sense of anxiety. It's like, okay, now I have to master a whole other set of resources, or now, okay, now I'm taking this thing that feels foreign to me, and now I'm interjecting it into this other thing. Now what do I do about it? And so instead of helping, it actually creates more anxiety. And so I would say the best resource we have as educators is our own experience and the experience of our students, right? So how do you go back to those primary experiences and allow those the space and time to emerge and give voice to their own needs, rather than saying, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like. Oh, art, we need paintings, or we need drawing materials, or it needs to look this kind of way. But what is our own aesthetic engagement with our everyday lives, right? I think that when we go back to that as educators, it's a way more empowering thing, not just for ourselves to feel more comfortable, but also to acknowledge that that's the root of it in our students as well.
Awesome. I have seen at our school, at Slate School, we do something called side-by-side learning, and we find that children learn so much more from watching people work than watching people perform. And so we love to see, people rehearse. We love to watch people, practice instruments, and we love to watch people make art, all different kinds of art. And we don't send them into the room and say, everybody go in and, think up your questions for Tom because he's painting today. We just allow the person to be in the space, and we allow the kids to be in the space too. And everybody asks questions. So, what comes up. And I think, more often than not, throughout the days and weeks that follow, we see their own expression inspired by that, and actually sort of freed by the idea that somebody was working beside them who actually calls him or herself an artist in that way. And so I hear what you're saying and resonates with me. So I was thinking about how. So if we're to do all of these things, and I think we are called to do all of these things. If we're to do that, how do we create an environment that is good for that? Well, what is essential for creating an environment where the arts have the freedom to exist? And if we're creating that environment, how do we? I'm looking at Aysha right now, because how do we make sure that that important piece that I think is often left to the side about movement, how do we make sure that there is space for that in the lives of the children? I mean, we can build beautiful schools, and we have to leave room for that. And I'm just wondering about your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I have thoughts. I try to be really clear around when I'm saying I have an answer, because the thing that I am most expert about is my own lived experience. Nobody else has ever been Aysha Upchurch. So I own that. And I also am very aware of everything that has informed my experience, how my own identity, how I self-identify as a Black cisgendered woman from the Midwest, now on the East Coast. All of that comes into play. So I just want to offer that anything that I say is not an answer for everybody. I don't believe in toolkit-itis. I don't believe in best practices, because that recuses people from going, well, what context am I in? How does my identity play a role in that? How does my own experience? Am I just trying to perform what someone else told me to do because they said this would be good for engagement? And so I just want to drop that little fine print off at the front door.
So, Aysha, thank you for saying that.
I can't be me if I don't say it. And I believe Jeff and all of us are here. We're pretty much, I mean, I just met you all, but if I could assume, I think we're all part of the same congregation and choir and pastor, all of those analogies. But I think it is very important for us to think about how all of this conversation around the role, the place, the power of the arts in education and in society has for so long been framed by putting the arts already as in a deficit frame. Like, well, what extra can they do? And I think where we are right now really exemplifies how central arts, aesthetic experiences are in our daily life. I really thank you, Chris, for naming that, because the thing that we cannot do right now is interact with arts as we do in the quotidian type of way to the point where we forget about. Right? We can't go to concerts, we can't go to museums, we can't take dance classes, we can't take music classes, we can't high five and paint with somebody in the same room, we can't dance and make things up together in space. And so for so long, I think people have thought arts are like this crazy big fancy thing that exists way over there. And some children will do way over there. And it's like, that is celebrityism that we've gotten hype about. A-list people who are at award shows who themselves have let the words arts and artistic practices and processes fall out of their language. And so I am getting to the role of movement, but I think it's very important for us to understand that we have made what is so essential seem so extra. And that's what I love about this panel, because in a way, there is actually nothing really exceptional about arts. They just are. They have been since the beginning of time. They will be. They are not disappearing. It is our framing of what we think arts mean, who we think artists are, what we think they look like, how we think it should work, and where the money comes from to fund further inquiry in it, right? And so I think if we can understand that that is operating under why it's so hard for us to create space for arts in schools, then that might get us closer to getting off of this polarized conversation of it's test scores, arts. I don't care about test scores. I have no problem being transparent. And where we are right now, the social emotional well-being of how we are as people and what we are now prohibited from doing, I think that instructs us also where our bodies are always taking in information daily about how we feel, what we need, where are my people, how can I feel better? Ooh, how can I let that out? Our bodies are always trying to work with the brain. It's not a separation. For any of my scholars listening, the Cartesian split between brain and body really needs to be canceled. Like the brain and the body work together. So if we want to talk about movement, then we got to not make movement like, oh, that's secondary. No, it's with the mind in mind. Like it's movement with the mind, right? And so if we can get to the bottom of the arts are not something that should ever be exceptionalized, I think then we can go, how do we embed movement into our practice? It doesn't seem so extra because there's a continuum, right? I am a dancer. I'm very comfortable moving and rolling around and facilitating activities for people to do that. That's not everybody's bag. And so then we have to go, what's the low hanging fruit? How is my room arranged? Is my room arranged in such a way where it says to students, turn your bodies off. The only posture of excellent learning, the only posture of rigor is to park your body under a desk and look forward. And so that is a cue about what movement, even before we get to activities and lessons, if your class has a pedagogy that says turn your bodies off, your students can feel that. You can probably feel that as an educator, right? And so I think if we can go back to low hanging fruit and go, how's the design of my space? Have I invited what my students do in their home and community environments into the classroom as an asset. You know, not just as a like, oh, let's take a dance break and then reset so we can do the real learning, but how can we use how the cultural DNA of people in their bodies as a part intentionally of the learning. And so these are things that are hard for me to tell people, oh, do this activity, because it might feel very contrived and forced, where I go, pause and look around your room, ask your students, make your space available physically in the layout, but also pedagogically in how you invite what students do in their bodies into the classroom. And I venture to say at the end of that, there are some teachers and adults who feel very shut off because we have been socialized to be out of our bodies. And so when we go back into the classrooms, we've now accepted some script of a performance that says, you stay in the front and don't interact, don't do it. It's a lot of no, 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 no. So we have that unlearning to do. So anybody who's looking for like ways to create that, you've got to do a little bit of homework of like, what do I need to do? I encourage my graduate students in our course on movement and education. I'm like, make sure you have a movement practice, because you cannot teach what you don't do, not for real. And I'll end right there because I could go on, y'all. I'm gonna stop.
I want to talk to Jeff, but I also want to say I am so happy to hear you saying that because, you know, when we started working at Slate School, we said we want to have, you know, we thought about height and what's low and what's high and moving around the room and making sure that there were lots of ways to sit and be and to learn. And there's no central spot in the classroom where one person stands and everybody listens. We just don't do that here. But in addition, we said we want to have a practice of movement and yoga and just our own practice that reflects everybody. And so every teacher at Slate School has an incredible opportunity to come 3 days a week and we all take class together. And so we do that 3 mornings a week so that what we give to our students is a reflection of the knowledge that we're all continually working to gain. We're building
that needs to be a PSA.
We're building our bodies and we're building our bodies together, and we're recognizing that we're all different, but we want to help you to do that too. And in order to do that, you know, we understand we have to be side by side learning with you. So I'm happy to get that word out all the time, anytime I get a chance. Jeff, I want you to talk a little bit. I have had the actual privilege of being in a classroom with Jeff when he comes in and collaborates with kids. And Jeff is an incredible collaborator with faculty too. But he has a way of coming into the classroom with, you know, basically nothing with him. Maybe a banjo. I don't know, maybe a guitar, sometimes a penny whistle. I don't know. I've seen him with a lot of different weird stuff that I don't even know the name of. But he comes into the room and you just have a way of collaborating with the kids. You have a way of listening and then identifying what's at the heart of what they're doing and reminding them that in whatever practice they're in, they are engaged in the arts. You're already engaged in music. They're already engaged in it before you even start to play. And the kids are engaged in it before they know they are. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you came to be that great and how we could emulate that in all of the areas of the arts that we work in.
Okay, well, thank you for that wonderful setup. You know, well, I'll tell you, as I was listening to what some of the others were saying here, it occurred to me I want to say my background in studying folk song, one of the things that I've gleaned from that is to approach music as not a performance ever. And that's something really empowering, I think, that people can learn from folk culture, is that we're doing it because it's who we are. It's something, in other words, music is just always in my back pocket. That's what I want for my students. I don't want my students thinking, oh, I'm preparing for a performance, so I better know my scales and my tonguing better be right, my breathing. Yes, there's a time to talk about technique, but if you're going to walk around always at the ready to be musical or artistic, then it's just another thing that you do. it doesn't need to be about the audience. You don't even need to acknowledge an audience to be a musician ever. So that's one way of coming about it. There has to be a sense of ease about the arts. And I think to that end too, as a musician, when I walk in with a student or a group of children, I think it's important to keep an open mind about what you know about your craft. A lot of times when I encourage children to make up their own melodies, they have a set of lyrics and I say, well, sing this for me. A lot of the time, it's not going to fit the structure of 4/4. It's not going to be in 4/4 meter. It's not going to be in 8 measure phrases. And that's what's so cool about it, right? And I'm there to be a guide. I'm there to be an editor sometimes. But some of the greatest songs that I've finished with children, that's really their composition, at least melodically, is to provide the support in the background and let the song go into 5 measure phrases. Then let it go into 3. Then it goes into 4 for a while. And that can be troubling, I think, for a lot of strictly trained musicians, because that's very unique. But when you stand back and you listen to some of these songs, you say, oh, well, it doesn't follow a lot of the traditional rules that I think I need to teach my students. And yet it works extremely well. And it's an artistic expression, that's distinct to that moment in time and those people that worked on it. And again, there will be an audience that finds it and appreciates it. But that if we set out like that every time as our goal, I think we miss a lot of opportunities to be innovative.
So I'm wondering now, just to build on that, with Chris and Aysha and you again, Jeff, like how do you, you're all teachers of teachers, right? So all of the people that are coming to you, I'm curious about what they're coming to you with and what they hope for. And I'm curious about what you want to send them away with. But now I think even more specifically, how do you give them the confidence to help kids make art in any way they see is appropriate for them? Chris, I want to start with you because I could see you nodding and thinking.
Sure. Well, I think, I just to respond to that context, I think like taking the time to experience what's emerging is critical. And I think a lot of our anxieties about teaching have to do with what we imagine the end state is supposed to be. So I think this idea of not thinking of music as performance is spot on. And I think we could generalize it to pretty much everything, right? That trusting that your ability to respond in the moment to what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, what you're feeling come up, sort of creative impulses is the thing, right? And education is not about the future. It's about what we can find in the moment. There is no future, right? There is just the moment. And I think this is sort of being able to, this is easy to say, it's much harder to embrace in contexts in which it's not honored. But I think that's the work of it, is to find ways to honor it in all the spaces we can. And in some sense, it's a very simple and elegant response, but it also then takes commitment to embrace and trust.
Bravery, actually, I think.
Sure.
Bravery. Aysha, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I wish I knew how to give anybody confidence, because then I'd ask for them to give some back to me, because it's, it's not a static fixed thing. I think anybody who wants to go into a classroom, and I often use the word classroom broadly to refer to any space where teaching and learning is happening, not just the kind of K-12 formal brick and mortar space, is to try to like remember to ask questions and to figure out and open yourself up to whatever your process is going to be, to like figure out how care and instruction live together with each other. I often like to like paraphrase a quote by Mary Helen Imbordano Yang, who's an affective neuroscientist. And the gist of what she's put out there is that learning is biologically impossible without care. And so I think for me, I center care, I center community building. And because I also know that I don't know the world without an artistic practice. I was born into like a dancing musical family. Then I know for me, a lot of care and a lot of feeling okay in community comes out of that. And so I try to offer the arts, an artistic practice, exercise, warm up, cool down as a way to frame the space to invite folks to feel okay. And then I get to sit back and listen and learn from students about like, oh, what do you lean on to, right? And from there, I think again, like thinking about Jeff, what I really pulled from you is this idea of we got to let things have a process and like get messy. And yeah, maybe the notes say play it that way, but what did you find? And so availing self to curiosity with students and understanding that the arts are just inherently a kind of inquisitive thing to engage with, I feel like is the really basic. Like, again, I feel like bad sometimes. I'm like, I don't feel like I know anything really special. Like these are just so like elementary principles, but we get so sophisticated and pulled away from that. And so I just offer educators and teachers that are going to go into the classroom for the first time, never forget the role of care, being honest, and that making space to learn with and from students. And I think the arts avail themselves to letting that play out.
Well, I think that's so right, because I think it is that listening piece. I think that you can, I actually do think that you can give confidence to people by listening to them.
I'll buy that.
Can I just say too that I think just the concept of play and never forgetting the role of play, and just what is play? It's completely improvisational. It's solo. It's with many people. It can be so many different things. It's spending time. It's trying things, and then if you like it, oh look, let's do this other thing too. Let's add to it. Let's try this. Let's move in this direction or move to a different direction. So I think just always remembering that aspect. It's funny because sometimes it seems easier to bring that to an early childhood setting, but it is just so elemental. It needs to be brought to all levels.
Absolutely.
You know, I think words are important, and we're saying the words play. And I think in my mind, you know, I think a lot of people separate play and practice. And play and practice, you know, really aren't different. I think practicing can be some of the most fun. As an actor, I loved rehearsal much more than I loved performance. You know, performance had a set beginning and a set end, but practice, rehearsal was this, you know, deep diving into things, this revelatory experience. And performance was sharing, and sharing is good, but rehearsal. So I think sometimes we need to be careful, and I hope that maybe somebody will talk about this a little bit, that we use these words play and practice, and even the word the arts, because I think that there's art in being a mail carrier. You know, somebody who hands me a letter every day is kind of an artist, and I don't want people to forget the art of what they do. I mean, the arts are not just music and dance and things we do on a stage. There's art in all of life, and I'm sure you've seen this, Lisa, plenty. So
yeah, I was gonna just add on to what you guys were saying. I don't work in a traditional education space, but I will say that this concept of playing and rehearsing is almost to me like problem solving, like you're figuring things out. There's no right, wrong way to do it. And that skill set is why I believe artists are so valuable in the policy and program space, because, and I also joke, I'm like, you know, if you can survive as like a working artist in New York City, like you have to be an incredible thinker and problem solver. So why wouldn't she want us in a room with policymakers talking about climate change? Like, to me, it's like the skill sets that we develop, and maybe it relates to this playing and rehearsing, and there's no clear, like, again, right or wrong way to do things, works our brain in a way that you just develop a skill set. Like, I feel like my problem solving skill set is so tight that you can tell me a problem that you have in any sector, in any element of whatever, and my brain just goes zzz, 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 and all of a sudden I'll come up with like 10 possible solutions to the problem. And so I'm not sure if, like, in the academic set there's that connection, but I think strongly that the skill sets that artists have are extremely valuable in the policy and program space. And I will also say that for the longest time, so I'm sure there's plenty of us, I grew up in a generation where, like, my mother didn't want me to be a dancer. I was in a hip hop troupe in college, and my mother's like, I did not work this hard as a waitress with no education for you to, like, be an artist, right? So I was discouraged from being an artist. So I ended up being a science major, then I was a pre-med, then I got my master's in public health, and then I kind of came full circle. So I think I was meant to do what I'm doing, but now I have, like, I can work at the UN primarily because I have a master's degree. But I was going to say that, now I lost it. I was going off on a tangent, but
Problem solving.
yeah, I just think that the skill sets that we do. Oh, I know what I was going to say is that in my world now, using the word art or artist is a little fluffy. Like, oh, artists want to do good in the world and they're passionate and they do whatever. But I learned when I spoke at this conference, at the World Conference on Creative Economy in Indonesia, where there were 2,500 finance ministers, that when you change the term, the language again, the term creative economy, which is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, it changes the audience's reception of who you are. So I would even think for the parents who are like, please don't be an artist, like, you're now not understanding that this being a creative is actually going to be extremely, you're going to have a lot of opportunities as the economy grows, because there's so much need for creatives. I'll stop there.
Maria, you can use that at your school. I'm sure I can use it at mine too.
Absolutely.
Lisa for president.
I could see a lot of connections happening right there.
Yes.
And I think this idea of connections is a really important one, and I think it's a bit of a superpower that we overlook. And I can just see around this group so many connections being made, and I'm sure that the people that are listening are connecting to what you're saying. I don't know if it's possible for us to really go any deeper within this hour, but I want to just thank everyone so much for being a part of this panel, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface on the conversation of arts as integral, because I think the conversation is not so much about convincing people, but just reminding people that what they feel, that what is exactly right to them, what they know in their belly is right about the way they communicate. And I think before we started, Chris and I were talking just a little bit, and I think it relates to what you were saying, Aysha, about this time, about the arts in this time. And it's a really challenging time for everyone. And obviously I have only my own lens, really, but I know that it's a challenging time, and I know that it's wildly challenging for people. But we have actually art, because art, you're right, does not depend on performance. Art is a tool that we have to share and we have to use for ourselves to get through times like this. And if I can hope for anything good coming of this, maybe there's some really incredibly brilliant art coming from the minds of people who are in their houses and uncertain, or discovering things that maybe they wouldn't have discovered. And we should be looking for that and hoping for that. So This concludes the time we have for this panel. I want to thank all of our amazing, amazing panelists for the incredibly generous sharing of your wisdom. And I always learn a lot from all of you. And so I just like to say thank you and conclude the way we conclude all of our meetings here at Slate School. The end of every meeting, we say to the kids and the kids say to us, thank you so much, and positive rice to all of you. Positive rice, the 6 continents, positive rice. And I hope that we can connect all together again. I think this conversation could continue. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. Positive rice from Slate School.
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Bye.
Bye. See you.